One night was all it took for you to lose everything.
I was watching my Cubs-Reds game, and Jim DeShays, the Cubs analyst, joked about a quality baby spotted in the Wrigley Field stands. The phrase has since become a running joke, and fans now look forward to his crowd observations. Adding to the fun, the Cubs were comfortably leading 7-2 in the 5th inning during a Reds pitching change. Just then, my wife of 6 years walked into the room with a beer for me and a glass of wine for herself. I shifted my attention from the quality baby on TV to her. Sorry, Jim, but a cute kid can't compete with the sight of my wife in tight, short denim shorts and a snug halter top. Is it quality baby time? She asked, noticing the TV. Yeah, but it's still not as good as quality wife time, I said, making her blush as she sat down beside me on the couch. I couldn't help but admire her, my eyes first catching her cleavage before moving down to the fit of her shorts. You guys are so predictable, she giggled, her chest bouncing slightly as she shook her shoulders. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the Cubs score 2 more runs. It wasn't long before Vivian figured the commercial break was the perfect time to talk. Hey, why don't we go to Chicago next weekend and do something to kick off quality baby-making time? She suggested with a bright smile. You could go to a Cubs game and I could do some shopping, or whatever. I caught the subtle hint when she said, or whatever, and raised an eyebrow at her. You're not coming to the game with me? Did I catch something or what? I teased, acting innocent. I felt her stiffen next to me. Well, I thought we could both take some time for ourselves before we start the whole throw away the birth control thing and start trying for a family, she said, flashing me one of her radiant smiles, her blue eyes sparkling. Vivian knew just how much power her smile had over me. After 8 years together, 6 of them married, there was no way I could turn her down when she gave me that look. But something about her plan didn't sit well with me. While I didn't outright reject it, I wasn't exactly convinced either. I agreed to the idea, but with a bit of hesitation, suggesting we go to Chicago. I proposed leaving Thursday night and taking Friday off to make it a longer trip. Vivian was enthusiastic, promising to handle all the arrangements. It seemed like a minor detail at the time, so I didn't think much of it until later that afternoon when we were back in the hotel room. After a casual lunch at a diner and a visit to the Shed Aquarium, I turned on the TV to ESPN to unwind. As I was thinking about what to wear for the evening, I asked Vivian what the plan was for dinner. She didn't respond immediately, and when I looked at her, I caught a slight shiver pass through her. Vivian explained that I would be going to the Cubs game that night, sitting behind the dugout on the third base side, where I could eat and drink during the game. As for her, she had dinner plans followed by drinks and dancing at one of the top clubs in the city. She wasn't sure when she'd be back, and she mentioned that she probably wouldn't be around much on Saturday either. Then, on Sunday evening when we returned home, we'd have our birth control pill ditching ceremony and officially start our family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The idea of her going off to party in Chicago alone for 2 days and a night didn't sit well with me. I confronted her, demanding to know what had happened to us and our vows. Vivian's response was cool and calculating. She said we talked about starting a family when we turned 30, and now that we had reached that milestone, she felt it was time. However, since she'd be the one carrying the child and sacrificing so much, her body, her career, her personal plans, she felt she deserved a bonus in return. I was shocked. A bonus? This wasn't part of our wedding vows, I pointed out bitterly. Vivian was unmoved, explaining that I wouldn't be the one carrying the child for 9 months or making all the personal sacrifices. I tried to remind her that I'd be the one working hard to provide for the family, making sure we had food and a roof over our heads. Didn't that count for something? But she brushed aside my concerns as though they were irrelevant, focusing only on her own needs. Her logic was clear to her. She had been loyal, had never given me a reason to doubt her love or faithfulness, and now she wanted something for herself. A short escape, a fling, nothing serious, just lust for a day and a half. Then after that, we could throw away the birth control pills and start our family. I was furious. Her selfishness was all I could see in that moment. I shot back that there was no I in us, but apparently, if she went ahead with this, there wouldn't be an us anymore. What would happen the next time we wanted to have a child? Would it be the same deal? She didn't seem to care about any of that. She wasn't asking for my permission. She was telling me what was going to happen. She was an adult, and she got to decide who she shared her body with. All I needed to do was get past my ego. I couldn't believe how self-centered she was being. If she thought this was just about my ego, she was wrong. It was about her complete disregard for everything we had built together. I even considered finding my own version of fun, just to show her how ridiculous this was. When I said that, she looked completely deflated, her confidence shattering. It was as if I had hit her. She quickly pulled out her phone and sent me the ticket for the Cubs game that night. She told me to take the car, and she'd grab an Uber to wherever she was going. She seemed to realize that I wasn't the kind of person who would just go along with this. I shook my head in frustration, grabbed my keys and phone, and left the room. I didn't look back. I'm sure she thought I was heading to the game, obediently playing my role in her plan. But deep down, I knew it was the last time we'd be heading in the same direction. Instead of attending the Cubs game in person, I opted to listen to the broadcast on the radio as I drove home. Pat Hughes and the team were in great form as the Cubs secured another win. At that moment, I didn't have any concrete plans, other than to get as far away from Vivian as possible. It's a painful realization when the person you thought you knew well turns out to be someone else entirely. I first met Vivian when I went to cash my first paycheck at the bank, where she worked as a teller. She had only been there for a couple of weeks, having just graduated with a finance degree. I was third in line, so I had a chance to notice her. Short blonde hair, green eyes, and a figure that was hard to miss under her professional blouse. She was good at juggling small talk with customers while efficiently completing their transactions. When it was my turn at her window, she greeted me with a smile and casually mentioned that my employer could set up direct deposit, saving me the hassle of waiting in line every payday. I already knew that, but I preferred the old-fashioned way of cashing my check. I'd grown up working for my father during the summers, and the idea of direct deposit never really appealed to me. I flirted a little, saying that if I used direct deposit, I wouldn't have any reason to come in and see her. Her face flushed, and she smiled even brighter, biting her lips slightly. It was clear she was interested too. Over the next 2 weeks, I made sure to choose her line at the bank, even if another teller had an open window. On one occasion, another teller called me over, but I just pointed to Vivian's line. The other teller got the hint and waved me off with a knowing nod. I like to think of myself as calm and rational, but I wasn't shy when it came to women. By the following week, I asked Vivian out on a date, and she agreed. Vivian turned out to be outgoing, intelligent, and from a wealthy family. Her father, a prominent local attorney, doted on her as his youngest and only daughter. I quickly realized that Vivian was used to getting what she wanted, especially when her father's money or influence could make it happen. I was on the rise at Bishop Enterprises, which made both Vivian and her parents happy. As our relationship grew more serious, Vivian's father, John Langer, had a candid conversation with me. He made it clear that he expected me to take care of his daughter and provide for her the way she was accustomed to, or there would be serious consequences. Be good to her, and you'll be treated like family. But if you hurt her or mistreat her in any way, you'll have me to answer to, John told me. My real first name is Quincy, a family tradition for the firstborn son in every generation of the Navarro family. So, everyone except Vivian's parents calls me Q. Her family calls me Quincy, though. 20 months after we first started dating, Vivian and I were married in a grand ceremony that left both of our families stunned. The officiant was a state judge, and one of the guests was a U.S. senator, whom Vivian referred to as Uncle Sherm. Before we got married, we had agreed to wait until we were both 30 to have children so we could focus on building our careers and saving money. Vivian's 30th birthday had just passed, and our trip to Chicago was meant to be a celebration of that milestone. By the time midnight arrived that Friday, I had packed 2 suitcases and loaded my car with most of my belongings. I'd called my younger brother Bill and arranged to stay at his house for a few days while I figured out what to do next. Bill and his wife promised to keep my whereabouts a secret, even if it meant lying to Vivian. Although she hadn't realized yet that I had left Chicago, likely still caught up with her bonus boyfriend. I knew she'd figure it out by Sunday, when we were supposed to head back home. I barely slept that night, replaying in my mind what had happened that led to Vivian's decision to cheat. I couldn't pinpoint exactly why she thought she could get away with it, or why she thought I would tolerate it. The closest I could come to an explanation was that by always giving her what she wanted, she thought I was weak or overly accommodating. She would soon find out how wrong she was. Saturday morning, I started taking steps to secure my financial future. I canceled all our joint credit cards and moved half of our money into an account in my name only. I wasn't sure whether Vivian had stayed out all weekend or just missed me leaving the room on Saturday, but it wasn't until Sunday morning around 9 a.m. that I got my first text from her. It simply said, "Where are you? We have to check out by 11. I showed it to my brother Bill, and we both laughed while sipping margaritas on his back porch. He got up to check on the bratwurst grilling for our brunch, and my sister-in-law was inside making homemade potato salad. In that moment, surrounded by family, everything seemed a little easier, even though life had turned upside down. About half an hour later, another text came through, followed by a series of increasingly frustrated voicemail messages. The first voicemail was a reminder that I had driven us to Chicago, so she didn't have a way to get home. The next voicemail was angrier, and the one after that sounded desperate as she apparently tried to extend her stay at the hotel, only to discover her credit cards were canceled. I couldn't help but enjoy the margaritas even more as the tension continued to build. Sharon, my sister-in-law, leaned over and asked, "You think you'll ever make up with her? You guys always seem so happy together, and I know you still love her." I sighed. I would have done anything for her, and I still care, but the way she handled this, it shows that, at best, I'm second place to her. She's put herself first. Later that afternoon, around 5 p.m., while Bill, Sharon, and I were still lounging on the porch, my brother's phone rang. He showed me the caller ID and raised his eyebrows. Giving me a choice to answer, I mouthed, "No way." He handed the phone to Sharon, who was slightly more sober than Bill and me. "Hi, Vivian. I'm answering Bill's phone because he's too chicken to do it himself. Yeah, we know what happened. No, we don't know where he is. How could you do this to the nicest guy in the world?" Sharon said, clearly not holding back. I could only imagine what Vivian was telling Sharon on the phone. Sharon rolled her eyes, responding with occasional uh-huhs and mms, before finally ending the call with a sharp, "Good luck." Sharon looked at me and smirked. "You bought yourself some time, but did you realize you walked out without hearing her side? You really messed this one up." I shook my head, not sure whether to laugh or get angry. "You're not buying that, are you?" "No," Sharon replied. "But that's what she's telling everyone. She's probably out there spinning her version of things while she looks for you." "Great," I muttered. "Another margarita, please." Bill, ever the good brother, refilled my drink. 8 margaritas in, I wasn't about to make any more decisions that day. On Monday morning, despite the hangover, I made it into work at my usual time, although I wasn't dressed for the office. I walked into my boss's office and told him that I was either quitting or transferring to another location, effective immediately. "You don't give a guy much time to think, do you?" my boss said sarcastically. "What's going on, Q?" I explained everything to him, including my half-formed plan to disappear for a while. I figured if I was lucky, it would take Vivian, and more likely my father-in-law, several months to track me down. The only thing I asked was that my employee name be changed to Oliver, my middle name, and that no information about me be shared, at least within legal limits. Within 5 minutes, my boss had a job lined up for me. The Santa Fe office in New Mexico had an opening, and within 30 minutes, Oliver Navarro was on his way to a new life. Quincy Navarro was no longer working in Indiana, and technically, I wasn't employed by Bishop Enterprises anymore. A week later, I started my new job. The company found me a small 1-bedroom apartment, perfect for my new single life. I also got a new phone and a different provider, so the bills and the calls wouldn't reach Vivian. I only gave my new number to a few close people. My parents weren't on that list. My brother had told me that my mom had gone on a rant about what I had done, and it was clear she was siding with Vivian. I wasn't in the mood to take any of her criticism, nor could I trust her not to give my number to Vivian. My father, caught in the crossfire, was collateral damage in this mess. If I gave him my number, my mom would find a way to get it from him, and I didn't want to put him in the middle of it. Bill and Sharon, however, were safe. I knew my mom wouldn't be able to get it from them, no matter how hard she tried. Vivian eventually caught on. According to Bill, it took her about a week to figure out that I wasn't in Chicago anymore. "How are we supposed to fix this if we can't talk or sit down together?" she asked Bill. "Maybe he doesn't want to fix it, Viv. You kind of ripped his heart out in Chicago," Bill told me he responded. "It was only 2 nights, Bill. It didn't mean anything," she said, trying to downplay it. "Maybe it didn't mean anything to you, but to him it meant everything," Bill replied. I settled into life in Santa Fe over the next year. My job was going well, but my personal life was non-existent, not that I was actively seeking anything. I had Bill check on my status occasionally to see if Vivian had filed for abandonment, but surprisingly she hadn't. I couldn't figure out why. Occasionally I'd join coworkers for a drink after work, but it wasn't until 18 months in that I went on my first date. The woman I met was stunning, a mix of Pueblo and Hispanic, with dark hair and eyes, and a body that looked even better in bed. We went out several times, but she was clearly looking for something more serious than I was ready to offer. A couple of months later, I met Evangeline Angel Bourne in my favorite quiet bar. She was an Irish beauty with fiery red hair, freckles, and striking blue eyes. I was just finishing a long day at the office and was enjoying a drink when she walked in with a group of women. One of them quickly staked a claim on me, saying I was hers for the night. Angel sauntered over with confidence, her shirt unbuttoned enough to show off her figure. We spent the evening talking, drinking, and dancing. Angel shared that she had a 2-year-old daughter and that the child's father was a mystery. She also confided that she'd had a rough night in the past, one where she'd been roofied at a bar. That experience, she said, taught her and her friends to never leave with a man they didn't arrive with. Her daughter, Eleanor, was the most important thing in her life, and she proudly showed me a picture of the adorable toddler. When I told her I didn't think kids were in my future, she was sympathetic, telling me I should get my situation with Vivian sorted out. I agreed, though it wasn't something I was rushing to deal with. Angel and I went on a few more dates, eventually including Eleanor in some kid-friendly outings. Eleanor was shy at first, but when I took the time to get down to her level, we hit it off, and soon I became her favorite adult. There were moments when Eleanor would pull me off the couch and insist that I sit on the floor so she could climb into my lap and fall asleep. It meant a lot to Angel, and I have to admit, it felt pretty good to me too. Though things were going well with Angel, we never talked about being exclusive. She'd mentioned early on that she was seeing someone else occasionally, and I assumed that was with a man named Bobby. We never really discussed it much, but after a few months, she casually mentioned that she and Bobby had gone shopping for lingerie. That's when I learned that Bobby wasn't a guy. She was a woman. Angel was bi, and Bobby was her partner. I was a bit stunned. Angel, sensing my surprise, looked away and asked if it was a problem. I didn't immediately respond, trying to process everything. It wasn't a problem for me, but it was definitely unexpected. I had never really considered the idea of being involved with someone bi before. I knew a few people who were, but this was my first time dating someone who identified that way. It took me a moment to absorb it, but I quickly realized it didn't matter to me what gender the other person in her life was. I joked that I didn't mind as long as her other partner was really pretty, but Angel reassured me that we each brought something different to the table. She laughed, and I couldn't help but join in. She also mentioned she usually told her dates early on about her bisexuality to avoid misunderstandings, and I appreciated her honesty. I told her I wasn't concerned about her relationship with Bobby, assuming it was with a man, and said I wasn't the type to be bothered by someone else's private life. We laughed it off, and then I asked her jokingly who Eleanor's favorite was. Angel playfully confirmed what I already knew, that I had earned a special place with her daughter. As time passed, I became a go-to backup for babysitting Eleanor whenever Angel had to work late. I even bought a car seat for my Mustang to make sure I could always be there for Eleanor when needed. Life felt settled in its own way, until one evening my phone rang with an unfamiliar name, Bobby Clarkson. My stomach dropped. I had no idea why she would be calling me, but I answered. Bobby's voice was frantic as she told me Angel had been liquidated in a car accident. The police had found Angel's phone and contacted Bobby. After confirming that Angel was gone, Bobby realized that I was authorized to pick up Eleanor from the babysitter, and we agreed to meet at Angel's apartment. When I arrived, Bobby was sitting at the kitchen table, sobbing. I walked in with a confused and upset Eleanor, and the two of us were enveloped in a tearful hug. After a few minutes, we pulled away and started to figure out what to do next. We pieced together what we knew about Angel's life. She was an only child with no surviving family, so it fell to us to care for Eleanor. Bobby managed to rustle up a quick meal of tuna sandwiches for us, and we fed Eleanor the little we could find in the pantry. The weight of the situation pressed down on us as we struggled to figure out what to do with Eleanor. We both agreed that we couldn't bear the thought of her going into the foster system, so we decided it would be best for Eleanor to stay with one of us. I offered to take her in. If the state doesn't know about her, they can't take her away. She can stay with me, I said, though I had no experience raising a child. Bobby asked if I knew anything about parenting, and I admitted that I didn't, but I figured I'd give it my best shot. After talking in circles for a while, we settled on a plan. I would move into Angel's place and become Eleanor's primary caregiver, while Bobby would help out as much as she could. Neither of us had been parents before, but we were determined to try. Bobby made a joke about the blind leading the blind, and it made me laugh for the first time that evening. I introduced myself properly, and instead of shaking my hand, Bobby hugged me tightly, tears still streaming down her face. "I'm going to miss her so much," she said, and all I could do was nod. "Me too," I murmured, feeling the weight of our shared loss. The next morning, I called into work and explained to my boss that I needed some time off to settle things with Eleanor. Bobby and I had decided to have Angel cremated, and I had to make sure everything was arranged. The following weeks were a blur as we found our routine. Bobby came over nearly every evening after work, and we took turns cooking. I could see why Angel had liked her. Bobby was smart, funny, and had that same bit of sass. She was tall, blonde, blue-eyed, and very attractive. I enjoyed her company, and on the nights she didn't come over, I missed her. Many nights she and I would talk about Angel and how we both felt about her. 3 months later, one evening after putting Eleanor to bed, Bobby approached me with a serious look on her face. I was sitting on the couch when she sat next to me, her feet tucked under her. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Oliver, what would you think about getting a bigger place and me moving in full-time with you and Eleanor?" she asked. "It would help with the bills, and we could share the responsibilities of raising her. I love her, and I want to be her mom, in a way. You could be her dad. We don't need to be married to raise a child. Plus, we'd both still be able to have our own lives. And since we're friends and not romantically involved, it might reduce the chances of us splitting up like my wife and I finished her sentence. Bobby was attractive, but since I knew she wasn't into men, I'd never make a move on her. Still, I'd grown very fond of her. We both adored Eleanor, and the idea of living together as a family seemed like a good one. It felt practical and made sense for all of us. Our bond grew stronger as we navigated this new family dynamic. Because there were no romantic complications between us, Bobby and I became very close. The three of us, Bobby, Eleanor, and I, settled into a real family life. The situation felt more solid when Eleanor started calling us Mommy and Daddy, something she picked up from daycare. When Eleanor first called me Daddy as I picked her up, my heart nearly exploded. The moment Eleanor called Bobby Mommy for the first time, Bobby froze. She just finished tying Eleanor's shoes, and when Eleanor said, "Thank you, Mommy," Bobby choked up and rushed to the bathroom to hide her tears. She came back a few minutes later, wiping her eyes, but with a big smile on her face. I chuckled and said, "Yeah, Mommy." I felt it too. Bobby playfully punched me in the arm and we both laughed. Except for the fact that Bobby and I didn't do any of the typical husband and wife stuff, we blended in seamlessly with other parents at school events or social gatherings. We were open about not being married if anyone asked, but we never got involved in conversations about childbirth or anything like that. We kept it casual. So you can imagine my shock when, about 4 years later, Vivian, yes, Vivian, showed up at our front door one Saturday morning. Oliver, there's someone here to see you," Bobby called from the living room while I was at the kitchen table playing with Eleanor. I walked into the living room, Eleanor trailing behind me, and I nearly froze in place when I saw Vivian standing there. It was a moment of pure disbelief for both of us. Is she yours, Q?" Vivian asked, staring at Eleanor like she was seeing a ghost. I was momentarily speechless, but finally managed to respond. "Well, she's ours," I said, motioning between Bobby and myself. "Yours? She can't be yours. We're still married." Vivian's voice trembled, and I could tell she was struggling to process what was happening. Seeing how shaken she was, I motioned for her to sit down on the couch. "Viv, calm down. Bobby and I aren't married, but Eleanor is our daughter," I explained. Vivian's relief was palpable, but she was still clearly rattled. "Oh, well, I guess we can work with that," she muttered, clearly trying to wrap her mind around things. "Vivian, what are you doing here after all this time?" I shot back. "Aren't we divorced now?" To my surprise, I discovered that Vivian and I were still legally married. She hadn't filed for divorce, initially thinking I'd return to her within the first year. After that, she and her father spent nearly 2 years trying to track me down before she finally mustered the courage to approach me about reconciliation. "Reconcile? Seriously?" I shot back. 4 years isn't enough to get over you ripping my heart out and treating me like I was nothing. A lifetime wouldn't be enough to forgive that. "I made a huge mistake," Vivian said, her voice breaking. "I love you. I always have. I'm sorry for what I did, for taking advantage of your good nature. I thought I could shock you into staying with me. I didn't expect you to walk away over a weekend affair. Wasn't the future we planned together worth more than that? You knew how I felt about loyalty," I replied. "You deliberately humiliated me, and I won't tolerate that kind of disrespect, not even from my wife." Vivian glanced around the room, her gaze briefly resting on Bobby and Eleanor. "Looks like you've moved on quickly," she said, her tone bitter. "It almost seems like you didn't waste any time." "Bobby and I didn't waste time. We built something real," I said, my voice rising. "And Eleanor is our daughter, whether you like it or not." Vivian looked like she was on the verge of breaking down, so I pointed to the couch and suggested she sit. "Calm down, Viv," I said. "Bobby and I aren't married, but Eleanor is still our daughter. We're a family now, and that's not something you can just undo." Vivian muttered, "Oh, I guess I can work with that." But I could tell she was still reeling from everything. I pressed further. "What are you even doing here? Aren't we divorced yet? After all this time, why now?" After a long silence, Vivian looked at Bobby and Eleanor, then at me. "I'll file for divorce as soon as I get home," she said quietly. "I don't want anything from you, but would you be willing to forgive me for being selfish?" "I can try, but that's all I can offer," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Vivian gave me a faint smile, stood up, and left. I hoped, for both our sakes, that it was the last time I'd see her. Once she was gone, Bobby sent Eleanor upstairs to play. She took my hand, leading me to the couch. Sitting beside me, her knees touching mine, she asked softly, "Did you really mean what you said about us being an us?" "Absolutely," I replied. "I may not love you the way I once loved Vivian, but I love you as a person, and I trust you completely. You're my family, Bobby. You and Eleanor. I love this us." "I get it," she said, smiling warmly. Even after the official divorce, I wasn't eager to dive back into dating. I wasn't the type to sleep around, not before my marriage, and definitely not now. I was focused on my family, and finding the one was no longer a priority. I still had fun occasionally, but I wasn't seeking out relationships. Bobby, on the other hand, had a much more active social life. We always communicated about our dating lives, making sure Eleanor remained our top priority. We had a rule: no bringing dates home unless it was for dinner. When Eleanor was nearly 11, Bobby and I knew it was time to tell her the truth about her family. We'd been preparing for this conversation for almost a year, and we were both nervous as hell. That night, we cried a lot as we showed her photos of her birth mother and explained the relationships between all of us. We told her about Angel's bisexuality and Bobby being a lesbian. We also explained why we chose to raise Eleanor ourselves instead of letting the state take over. "We're not a family by blood," Bobby said, "but we're a family by love." Eleanor was understandably confused and anxious for a few days as she processed everything Bobby and I had explained to her. She was a bright, mature child, and after some time it seemed like she'd fully grasped the situation. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, she asked a question that showed just how much she had been thinking. She wondered aloud why Bobby and I hadn't just let child services take her, thinking that it might have been easier for both of us. I told her that doing what's right is often harder than taking the easy way out. I reassured her that I'd never regretted the decision to keep her, even though there were certainly challenging moments, like when she had thrown up birthday cake all over my new suit when she was 6. Bobby, with a tear in her eye, nodded, her own memories clearly hitting her. In addition to our circle of friends, Bobby and I had built some new friendships as a couple. We often went out with these friends, sometimes dancing, which Bobby loved. She was a much better dancer than I was, but I did my best to keep up. Our friends, most of whom knew we weren't romantically involved, often commented on how good we looked together. Bobby sometimes danced with other friends when we were out, but she never entertained invitations from strangers. She was no stranger to attention, as both men and women were drawn to her, but she handled it with grace. Most men who approached her took her polite rejections well, but not all. One evening, after dancing with our friend John, a man who appeared to be much younger than her tried to grab her wrist and pull her back to the dance floor after she turned him down. Standing at 6 2 inches and 180 pounds, I was in decent shape, and I wasn't about to let anyone treat a friend like that. I grabbed the man's arm, twisting it hard enough that he howled in pain and let go. That's when Bobby, who had played college soccer, quickly turned toward the man and delivered a swift knee to his groin. He crumpled to the floor, his face hitting the table on his way down. By the time the bar manager and a bouncer arrived, the young man was curled up in pain on the floor, his face a bloody mess. The police were called, but after taking statements from all of us, it was decided that neither Bobby nor I would face charges. Bobby, always cool under pressure, shrugged it off. She explained that her father, Al Clarkson, had taught her self-defense from a young age, and that the man had made a serious mistake in how he treated her. I joked that we should ask her dad to teach Eleanor some self-defense techniques when he came to visit, and Bobby smiled, clearly appreciative of the idea. A couple of years prior, Bobby and I had moved into a large 5-bedroom home, which we had remodeled to suit our growing family. We now had 2 master suites and a spacious family room, which quickly became the hangout spot for Eleanor and her friends. Bobby and I had naturally stepped into a parental role for several of the teens in our social circle, and it was something we both thoroughly enjoyed. I knew that Bobby had been seeing a woman, Stephanie Ellis, for a couple of months when she invited her to dinner with Eleanor and me one Saturday evening. Bobby was cooking her signature veal parmigiana and spaghetti, and I could tell this woman must be special by the effort she put into the meal. Stephanie, with her striking features, big brown eyes, porcelain skin, curly dark brown hair, and a body that could have graced a magazine cover, was visually stunning. Eleanor, ever the perceptive one, leaned over to me quietly after Stephanie arrived and remarked, "Dad, you need to let Mom pick you a woman. She's really good at it." I couldn't help but agree with her. Stephanie wasn't just beautiful on the outside. She was kind, funny, and easy to talk to. Eleanor warmed to her immediately, and Bobby was completely smitten. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy when I saw how Bobby's face lit up whenever Stephanie walked into the room. It was a reminder of what it felt like to be in love, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. It took some time for Stephanie to adjust to our family dynamic. Bobby and I were co-parents, having raised Eleanor together for years, and we were incredibly close. Our relationship had evolved far beyond just friendship, and Stephanie seemed unsure of how she fit into all of that. Still, she made an effort to get comfortable with our bond. A few weeks into their relationship, Stephanie called me and asked to meet for lunch, but she asked me not to tell Bobby. I was a little hesitant, but agreed. When we met, Stephanie came right to the point. She admitted that she couldn't quite figure out the nature of Bobby's and my relationship. She wasn't sure if we were still deeply connected or if we had truly moved on, and she didn't want to get too involved with Bobby if we were still in a loving, committed partnership. When I smiled brightly, Stephanie looked concerned. She seemed to doubt that someone like Bobby could ever be interested in someone like me, even if Bobby weren't a lesbian. I told her that, while I appreciated the compliment, I didn't see it that way. Our relationship was loving, sure, but it definitely required some explaining, so I spent the next hour laying it all out for her. By the end of it, she had a clearer understanding of our family dynamics, and rye whiskey too. After a bit of reflection, Stephanie told me she was in. She was ready to be a part of our family. 6 months later, Bobby and Stephanie got married. Since her father had passed away years earlier, I walked Bobby down the aisle and gave her away. Eleanor, now 15, was one of Bobby's bridesmaids. Eleanor was the spitting image of her biological mother with her red hair and blue eyes, and I couldn't help but dread the idea of being the father of a pretty teenager. I remembered what I was like as a teenage boy in high school, and that terrified me. Bobby and Stephanie said I wasn't handling it well. I didn't really see it, but they certainly did. "You can't just threaten high school boys with bodily harm every time they kiss our daughter," Bobby said sternly after one of Eleanor's dates. "Did you see her face? You totally embarrassed her." Stephanie chimed in, agreeing. "You're not going to meet any more of her dates. One of us can pass on your wishes to them from now on." I wasn't about to argue, especially when they had both made me apologize. Eleanor then asked me, half teasing and half serious, if I'd be as crazy if she ever dated women. I told her probably not, but then she'd have to deal with her mom and Stephanie, which would make things just as hard on her dates. Eleanor thought about it for a moment and admitted that it might be even worse. A few weeks later, Bobby said, "We need to talk." Every man knows that those words usually lead to trouble, but I wasn't scared. I was more perplexed than anything else. When she called me into the formal living room, I found Stephanie sitting there, looking a little nervous. She handed me a shot of Angel's Envy rye whiskey as I sat down. Bobby joined her on the couch, and I immediately sensed this wasn't just a casual conversation. "I'm sorry for whatever I've done wrong," I said, trying to head off any conflict. "I won't do it again. Ever." Bobby and Stephanie exchanged confused glances before Bobby laughed. "Relax, Oliver. It's not what you think. But we'll keep that apology handy for the next time you mess up." Then she hesitated before finally saying, "We need a favor." Stephanie, looking somewhat uncomfortable, jumped in quickly. "Would you be willing to donate reproductive cells for us? For in vitro fertilization?" There was a long, awkward silence as I tried to process what they were asking. I finally stammered, "Pardon me?" Bobby explained it again, this time much more clearly. They wanted to have a baby, and they wanted me to help. At first, I was too stunned to react, but then a grin spread across my face. My heart swelled, and I shouted, "Oh, hell yes!" The room erupted in celebration as both women jumped up, hugging me like kids who had just won a prize. After the excitement died down, I asked, "How did you two pick me? Why me?" They shared a look, both grinning widely. Stephanie answered first. "Choosing you was easier than asking you. We picked you because you're smart, kind, respectful, handsome, and fit. You're a great dad and a great man. We'd be lucky if our child inherited even a little bit of that." I'd only cried a few times in my life as an adult, but this was one of those moments. I couldn't hold back the tears. As I wiped my eyes, I offered to sell them my half of the house so they could move in together, but Bobby immediately refused. No, no. We don't want you to leave. We want you here. We want you to help raise this baby the way you and I raised Eleanor. I think we did a good job, don't you? I had to admit that raising Eleanor had been one of the best experiences of my life. But I was still unsure about how Stephanie felt about all of this. She seemed to sense my concern and spoke up. "Studies show that kids thrive best when they have both a mother and a father in the home," she said. "Imagine how well this baby will do with 2 moms and a dad, and a big sister, until Eleanor heads off to college." Her words reassured me, and I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "Thank you," I managed to say, choking on my emotions. That night, we told Eleanor at dinner. She jumped up from her chair and hugged both Bobby and Stephanie tightly. "I get to be a big sister?" she squealed, her excitement palpable. It was a moment that felt like the beginning of a beautiful new chapter for our family. 2 months later, Bobby, Eleanor, and I were anxiously waiting for Stephanie to come out of their bedrooms en suite, hoping for confirmation that she was pregnant. When she finally emerged, tears of joy streamed down her face, and we all embraced in a heartfelt group hug. On a personal level, I felt overwhelmed with emotions. 13 years earlier, I had resigned myself to the idea of never having children. Now, here I was, about to become a father for the second time. It was a reminder that family takes many forms and can surprise you in ways you never expect. As Eleanor grew older, I was always impressed by her maturity and intelligence. She never seemed fazed by the fact that our family didn't fit the typical mold. Sure, she mentioned being teased from time to time, but she never complained about the fact that Bobby was a lesbian, that Bobby and I weren't married, or that we each had different last names. Then we added Stephanie to the mix, along with her surname, and eventually a baby who took Stephanie's name as well. We decided to keep Eleanor's surname as it was, since it was already on her birth certificate. Throughout the years, Eleanor was well-liked by her peers, and her friends often gathered at our house, sometimes friends from her soccer team or the band. But adults weren't always as understanding as kids. Occasionally, we heard snide remarks from others, though it was usually done in whispers, as most people didn't want to cross me, or Bobby for that matter. Bobby could be sharp-tongued when it came to defending her family. Eleanor graduated high school as salutatorian, and despite my offer to help her with her speech, she insisted she had everything under control. She never practiced it in front of me, Bobby, or Stephanie, so I had to wait like everyone else to hear it. On graduation day, Roman, now just shy of a year old, was nestled in my arms as we made our way to the gym. Bobby and Stephanie were in front, and we kept getting stopped by women who couldn't resist admiring the baby. When I saw Eleanor's speech listed in the program as "There's no I in team," I knew it was going to be something special. Eleanor's speech was about how teamwork can overcome individual weaknesses and how the strength of a group can create something greater than the sum of its parts. She used our own family as an example, showing how 5 different people could come together as a unified, successful unit. It was a proud moment, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house when she spoke. I felt taller in that moment, literally and figuratively. When it came time for Eleanor to leave for her freshman year at Arizona State University, we all piled into the car for a family road trip, leaving 5 days early to do some sightseeing before dropping her off. When we finally said our goodbyes, I was last in line for hugs. In hindsight, I realized the order wasn't accidental. "Promise me, Dad, that you'll make finding a good woman a priority now that I'm gone," Eleanor said quietly as the others walked back to the car. "I know it wasn't something you focused on while I was around, but now that I'm leaving, Mom has someone good. You need that too." I nodded, smiling faintly. "I'll try, baby, but no promises. Good women like Stephanie aren't exactly easy to find." It wasn't a surprise when Roman started calling me Daddy as his first word for me. My heart swelled every time he did. But what was unexpected was that he called Bobby and Stephanie Mommy as well, and they somehow always knew who he meant, even though I couldn't tell any difference in how he said it. 2 years after Eleanor's college graduation, I had the privilege of walking her down the aisle at her wedding. I didn't have much of a role in the wedding itself. Eleanor, Bobby, and Stephanie did all the planning, laughing and smiling through every step. My main job was to pay my share and keep 7-year-old Roman entertained. Her fiancé, Jack Lassiter, seemed like a nice guy, but that didn't stop me from having a little talk with him. I made sure he understood that if he ever hurt my little girl, there would be serious consequences. I said this while I had him in a one-armed chokehold, just to make the point clear. He could barely speak through the pressure, but he agreed to everything. Maybe it was a little extreme. But hey, she's my daughter, and I wanted her future husband to know that I was serious about her safety. Despite being in my mid-50s, I still stayed in shape and hit the gym regularly. The wedding itself was perfect. I made sure to enjoy every moment of it, visiting each guest table, eating delicious food, drinking great liquor, and dancing with plenty of women. It was a day to celebrate not just Eleanor's marriage, but the incredible family we had built together over the years. I was chatting with a few friends when a lively woman with shoulder-length silver hair streaked with purple appeared out of nowhere. Without a word, she grabbed my hand and tugged me toward the dance floor. "Got a height requirement for your dance partners, big guy?" she teased, pulling me into the crowd as the others nearby laughed. "I'm Aunt Deb," she introduced herself as we got settled on the floor. "I'm Jack's mom's best friend. I changed your new son-in-law's diapers when he was a kid." She flashed a bright, playful smile, her eyes dancing as she spoke. "My nephew's only said good things about you, and he also warned me about your infamous chokehold." I couldn't help but give her a quick once-over. She had the build of a gymnast, small bust, but strong legs and a powerful lower body. And she could certainly move. The first 2 songs were fast, and she kept up effortlessly. The third was a slow one, and while I tried to maintain a respectful distance, she wasted no time pressing herself close, almost instinctively. "You've got a great workout routine," she said, clearly impressed. Afterward, we went to the bar together, hand in hand. I had a feeling she was staking her claim, and I didn't mind. But if that was her plan, she'd first have to get through the American version of the Spanish Inquisition. Bobby and Stephanie. I led her back to our table, introduced her, and then made a hasty exit to give them time to size her up. "I'm getting you another drink," I said with a grin. "You'll definitely need it." As I reached the bar, Jack's mom, Marcia, was waiting with a wide smile on her face. She nodded toward Deb at the table with Bobby and Stephanie. "She's a firecracker," Marcia said, "but I've heard you 3 are fiercely protective. Let's see how she handles the grilling. Give it a few minutes before you head back." I took Marcia's advice. She filled me in on some details about Deb's past. She was a year younger than me, had been married for 15 years, and had caught her husband cheating a decade ago. "She kicked him in the balls and then kicked him out," Marcia told me with a grin. 5 minutes later, I returned to the table. The 3 women were laughing so hard they could hardly breathe. For some reason, I didn't feel quite as comfortable as I had before. Later, 2-year-old Kayla Lassiter was running through the house, giggling as she chased our 2 Labrador retrievers. Jack and Eleanor were sitting at the kitchen table with 4 of her 6 grandparents, sipping iced tea. They lived about 45 minutes away, but we spent a lot of time together, especially since they had our first grandchild. Jack's parents, Marcia and Tom, had expressed some jealousy about how often we saw Kayla, so we invited them to spend Christmas with us. We figured it would be a perfect time for all 6 grandparents and Uncle Roman to enjoy the holidays together. Marcia was an easy sell, especially since it gave her a chance to see Deb again, whom she hadn't seen in over a year. Tom was a bit more reluctant. He admitted to me privately that he felt uncomfortable around Bobby and Stephanie, not having spent much time with lesbians before. "They're just regular married women, Tom. Same as you and Marcia," I told him. "I'd trust either one of them with my wallet, my wife, my daughter, my granddaughter, and my life." "Well, I have to admit," Tom said, "they're both very attractive women. I always thought lesbians were masculine-looking. That's not the case with them." I couldn't help but laugh at his comment. "No, Tom, don't overthink it. They're still women. They probably have more shoes than you and I combined." Deb turned out to be everything I could have wanted in a wife, and more. I'm pretty laid back, but she was full of energy. She never seemed to sit still. The first spring she lived with us, I found myself digging up a garden for her, planting all sorts of salad vegetables while she supervised. I teased her about being part cat because, as we all know, cats make the best supervisors. Bobby and Stephanie took to her quickly too, though not without giving her a stern warning before we married. They told her that if she ever broke my heart, they'd pound her to dust. When Deb told me about the warning the day after they gave it to her, she looked pretty shaken. "I'm sure they weren't kidding, babe. I told her seriously. We've always had each other's backs. I know they weren't kidding, she replied, but if I ever hurt you, I won't stick around. I'll make myself scarce so fast, you won't know what hit you. That's called self-preservation. Deb ended up convincing Marcia and Tom that Santa Fe was a great place to retire. 8 years later, they made the move. They'd actually retired a bit earlier than planned when the house next to ours came up for sale. Tom really warmed up to the whole situation when he found out Bobby was also a huge Premier League soccer fan. Bobby supported Arsenal, while Tom was a loyal fan of Crystal Palace. Their friendly rivalry was just like one might imagine in an English pub, complete with plenty of banter. Things definitely got heated whenever their teams went head-to-head. "Shut up, you idiot!" and "Take a hike, old man!" were just a few of the choice phrases that flew around when we watched Arsenal and Crystal Palace face off. If you think baseball fans are intense, you haven't seen soccer fans. At least that's what Deb, Stephanie, Marcia, and I quickly learned. Jack and Eleanor made sure to keep the grandkids away on match days, especially when Arsenal and Crystal Palace played each other. One evening, as I sat on the back porch of our Santa Fe home, swinging gently and sipping a glass of Jameson Black Barrel whiskey, I reflected on how lucky I was. It was a perfect summer night, and I was deep in thought when my oldest granddaughter came out, sat beside me, and leaned her small frame against mine. For what seemed like the 100th time, I noticed how much she resembled her late grandmother, with her fiery red hair and sparkling blue eyes. "What are you thinking about, Grando?" she asked, calling me by the special nickname she'd given me. "I was thinking about how fortunate I've been," I replied. "How are you lucky?" she asked, genuinely curious. I took another sip of whiskey, trying to figure out the right way to explain this to a 9-year-old. "Well, sweetie, you know how sometimes something bad happens, but everything works out just fine in the end. That's kind of what happened to me," I said. She shifted a bit, then stared up at me, thinking hard. Then her face lit up, and she broke into a big grin when she figured it out. "Like when I scraped my knee the other day, and Grandma Deb gave me ice cream?" she said excitedly. I chuckled and smiled down at her, pleased with her answer. She beamed up at me, knowing she'd nailed it. "Exactly, baby. Exactly."